Our greatest gifts in life are our happy relationships. But with this pandemic and other distractions, we are becoming less connected to what's most important. Let's talk about how to develop social connections and happiness. Peter Montoya is my guest on this episode of Coz TV. So earlier this week, I saw on Facebook, Peter Montoya made a simple little post. He said, for my emotional well-being, I'm going to be doing video chats this week. So reach out to me if you want a video chat. Peter, it's so good to at least see you on video.
Coz, so good seeing you. I was really beating myself up because I hadn't seen you in the flesh for probably, absence of social media, probably since early 2000s at some point in time. So I was really remiss in not keeping better contact with you.
Well, just to bring our communities up to date. So I was serving as deputy chairman at Bill Good Marketing, and we had strategic partners in the financial services industry. And Peter Montoya, at the time, the author of The Brand Called You, did a lot with our company. We shared referrals. We were quasi-competitors, but we saw an opportunity to help each other. So those were good old days, Peter. Where in the world is 20 years gone?
It's like the blink of an eye. As soon as you have kids, 15 years goes by like that.
Amen. Amen. Well, give us a quick update. What are you doing now?
So I had an advertising agency specializing in financial advisors. And in 2008, I kind of transformed that into a software company called Marketing Pro, which did marketing automation for financial advisors. And then in 2018, I had a really great exit and sold my software company. And now I'm pursuing my real passion, which is leadership development. So I'm an author, speaker, and trainer in the area of leadership development.
Excellent. And I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about that at the end and how people can find you and get a hold of you. But let's talk about these interesting times with the COVID-19 pandemic and what's just happening in the world. So let's just start with, what's your general feel with what's happening in the world today?
It's a very, very surreal time. I am really safe. I have my wife, who you can probably see over my shoulder. I got 2 kids in the house, 2 teenage kids who are 14 and 16. We have one of our best friends and her 2 teenage daughters all in our house. So there's 7 of us in the house. And our household is relatively serene, even with all of these teenagers and the moods of being quarantined. We're really quite happy. We do daily walks. We have daily dinners. We play games. There's always a lot of camaraderie here. So I know there's a lot of pandemonium and suffering happening in some of our nation's hospitals and around the world. But for me, my house is really quite sanguine. It's quite happy over here.
Well, it is interesting to watch the merchants of hysteria with cable news and the mainstream media. And I'm not sure we always get a great representation of what's happening day to day. We see the numbers come in, we see sensationalized numbers, and I'm not sure what we can always believe. But I am here to say that I know it's a worldwide pandemic. People are dying, and any death is definitely a tragedy. But we also want to talk about that there may be some silver linings we'll talk about a little bit later, but also what we can do to stay connected, because one of the things that is working is the social distancing. So let's talk about that, Peter. Tell me a little bit about your community that you were telling me about so that we have some frame of reference about why we want to talk about relationship and human connection.
Oh, great. So first of all, a small little reframe that I've been using in my community. And rather than talking about social distancing, we're using the word physical distancing, because we still want to have the social connection, even though we may be physically apart. So even before COVID-19 happened, we as a species here in the United States have been suffering from from a real lack of connection. So here are some of the numbers that I know about. First of all, back in the 1980s, sociologists asked American adults how many good friends they had, and the average American had 4 confidants, people who they could go out and have a beer with, go have coffee with, cry on their shoulder with. They had 4 confidants. And then in 2015, they conducted the same survey here in the United States, and guess how many confidants the average American had now, Coz, in 2015?
I gotta guess it's less.
Yeah, it was on average less than 1. Most people.
How do you get less than 1?
Well, the average.
Right, I'm with
was
you.
Less than 1.
Somebody had 3 and somebody had nobody. So I got you.
Yeah.
Well, that's, you know what, that's a real human tragedy, because if our greatest gifts of life are human relationships, and somebody can go to the grave and say, gosh, I really didn't have a confidant, that's a difficult life to live.
Oh, yeah.
That's a tough road to hoe.
It's so horrible. It really is a tragedy. And here's the reason why it is such a tragedy. There's a lot of reasons. So Harvard has the longest longevity study in mankind, over 80 years. In 1921, they found about 421-year-old men. Half of them were from Harvard and half of them were from Southie. So if you remember the movie Good Will Hunting, they were from Southie.
Southie, Boston.
Right. And back in 1920, half the men from Southie came from blue collar families. They didn't barely finish high school, or didn't go to high school, didn't go to college. And more or less what these researchers wanted to find out over the next 80 years is what led to a lasting, loving, happy life. They started measuring everything back then. So parents, ethnicity, religion, siblings, education. Now, a lot of these men went off to World War II and they died. They became bricklayers. They became truckers. They became doctors and lawyers. One of them even became president of the United States. So one of 400 in that study was John F. Kennedy. Obviously died in 1963. And more or less, they studied every last factor you can possibly imagine. They came up with one unbelievably conclusive factor that was the number one factor in living a longer, happier, healthier life with better brain function. Coz, I'm going to put you on the spot. What's your guess? What was the number one factor for living a longer, happier life with better brain function?
I would say it was positive relationships.
Yes, relationships. So all of those relationships is what creates the longer lasting life. Now, they broke it down in two categories: your high intensity relationships and your low intensity relationships. High intensity relationships is about 60% of it. That's your, brother, sister, kids, close friends, those people you spend a lot of time with. And the other 40% were the low intensity ones. And those are those casual interactions that we have all day long. The postman who's walking by, the neighbor who we wave to down the street, the person we're taking your order from. That was 40% of the puzzle as well.
So if that's the number one ingredient to living a happy, fulfilled life, what's getting in our way? Okay, let's take the pandemic out of this right now.
Yeah.
That we have to have this physical distancing, and I like that. I'm going to change that. We're dealing with 6 feet apart physical distancing, but we should not have social distancing where we're disconnecting from our community and our world. What's getting in our way then? If we take the pandemic out of the equation, what's getting in the way?
So again, I'm going to share with you a couple of different statistics here. And the first one came from Gallup. And Gallup did a study to basically figure out how many hours per day led to the optimum level of enjoyment, happiness without a lot of worry and stress. And what percentage of people who had low social connectivity per day had maximum worry and a lot less enjoyment. And it turns out that people who had between 3 and 4 hours a day of good social connectivity had the lowest amount of worry, the lowest amount of stress, and the highest amount of enjoyment and happiness. About 3 to 4 hours a day is what we need to really feel good about ourselves.
So not being in the workplace around our peers and work associates, we're not getting even a daily dose of that. I mean, no. we love our families, and being quarantined with them has definitely been fun to play board games, have family dinners and Netflix binges together, but it's still not the same connection is what you're saying.
Well, so those numbers, 3 to 4 hours a day, was pre-pandemic. It was 2012 where those numbers came from. The next question I've got for you is how many hours per day, and this is pre-pandemic, was the average American getting in good social connection? What's your best guess?
You know what? We would have to define good social connection. Because to me,
so it's very subjective,
right?
And
so
what we're looking for,
to me, good social connection. I guess I'm a little different because I'm, deep down inside, I'm an introvert in some respects, but then I also can, charge my batteries by being social. But for me, I get the most out of a relationship when I'm, as the Japanese would say, head to head, knee to knee, belly to belly, with people that I can develop a relationship with. Yeah. Facebook doesn't always cut it for me.
It's kind of empty. So I like to say, this is my model, and I don't think it's probably scientifically proven, but it's one way of looking at human interaction. Let's just say there's three ways of being with people. And the first way you can be with somebody is information sharing. It's two people who are just sharing basically like a drive-through window. What do you want to order? Here's what I want. Or somebody asking, your coworker asking, hey, where's the report? And you say over there. There's no emotion involved. You're just sharing information. Second way with being other people is problem solving. And this is one of the reasons that our species is the alpha species on the planet, is we are able to actually collaborate and solve really big problems. This is incredibly constructive, but also this way of being usually can tend to be a little more judgmental and a little less emotional. The third way we can be together is empathetic. And empathetic is to see the world from somebody else's shoes. This is when you're at a party and you're talking with somebody and you're laughing and you feel connected. That's when you're really experiencing empathy with somebody else. So it is subjective, but what I think we're really going for is 3 to 4 hours of that empathy-spaced time where you're actually connected with somebody else.
But there's so many distractions. When's the last time you or I, outside of a significant other or maybe family, had 3 or 4 hours of that empathic type of connection every day?
Yeah. Maybe a stretch for some people. I certainly see it. So let me go back to my question is, how many hours per day do you think the average American right now, so the average American pre-pandemic was getting? We need 3 to 4 hours. How much time do you think we're actually getting?
Well, you see, Peter, I was just doing my best impersonation of being a current politician. You ask me a question, and I take you down a rabbit hole and don't answer it. So I would say, obviously,
well
less than probably an hour a day.
Exactly right. I think it's 41 minutes a day or 46 minutes a day. I can't read my screen because I have my glasses off. It's like 45 minutes a day. So we need 3 to 4 hours. We're getting 45 minutes a day. That's 70. So we're way off. So the question is, where is all of our time going? And here is what we discovered. How much time per day is the average American spending on screens?
Well, that's probably, I'm going to guess because I haven't seen your slides or anything. I'm going to say it's 5 to 7 hours a day.
You're in the right direction. 11 hours a day.
So 11 hours a day. That's not just social media. Okay.
Tabs.
Sure.
Yeah. Phones.
Our screens.
Any type of screen.
Sure. The screen. So if I'm watching a movie, that's still screen time. Social media, surfing the web. I'm with you on that.
Or work.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Put work in there because we know how much work is really happening right now when people are at home working.
So long, short, we need 3 to 4 hours. We're getting 41 minutes and we're spending 11 hours a day on screens. So we can certainly know exactly where the problem is right now. And the reason is, screens to us are kind of a symbolic substitute. They make us think we're getting what we need without actually giving us what we need. So Facebook is a symbolic substitute for a real face-to-face connection. Adult films is a symbolic substitute for a real romantic relationship with all of its complexities and ups and downs. A pet, and I love pets, is a symbolic substitute again from another sophisticated human relationship.
But Facebook has just become a dopamine mine, hasn't it? We just post things to get, likes, and then all of a sudden we get that rush of dopamine and we can't wait to post something else or see if somebody liked what we had. How much of that is really an exchange of relationship?
Very, very little. Yeah, very, very little. So, we're voyeurs. All of us are voyeurs. And we also do have a natural curiosity about seeing what's happening with our friends. And I love seeing what's happening with my friends and the posts and the vacations and the kids and stuff like that. That's really important and positive.
Sure. And in that respect, Facebook has become a great community newspaper, right? When you and I were kids, we got that little weekly newspaper thrown on the driveway. Facebook is like that for me. When I went on Facebook initially, it was just to see what my kids were doing. And then I spent all those years on the road and I was posting things thinking, well, I just don't really even care as long as I have an audience of 2. So Megan and Ben know what's going on in my life. And it's taken off since then. But we all have our different purposes, I guess. But for many people, it truly has become, it's become a drug. And I think that screen time only increases because, and maybe it's because of this pandemic, but we become disconnected from people physically, right? And so maybe we're overcompensating with the dopamine drug of Facebook or social media.
That's absolutely correct. Yeah. So once again, it's a symbolic substitute. It makes us think we're getting what we need when it's actually not.
So it's
what
faux.
we need is even this.
But it's faux. Is that what you're saying? So if it's shallow or empty, does it really do anything?
No. So, social media is at its best when it facilitates real world interactions. That's when it's absolutely at its best, when it helps you connect with somebody, and then it helps you actually say, I remember where you are, I haven't seen you in years, when I'm in Salt Lake City, I'm going to drop it in and see you. That's when it's at its best.
In that respect, then, mission accomplished with social media. You made a simple post that just said, hey, for my emotional well-being, I'm going to do video chats. I raised my hand and said, hey, Peter, let's chat. And here we are, we've caught up after 20 years. So I'm with you on that. It allows us to at least connect and start the conversation. But like we're doing here, we're going past just a quick little chat in a comment screen.
So you got to get beyond social media. So if you're only staying on social media, that's all you ever plan, you're missing the point of it. It's a through point on the way to the human relationship.
It's just the on-ramp.
Yeah. That's it. And social media is at its worst when it keeps you from having conversations with the person to your left and right. I mean, I've been traveling, in business hotels now for 20 years. And, there's always the hotel and the bar downstairs. And sometimes you're traveling and you want to eat in the room. And other times you want some social interaction.
Sure.
And 20 years ago, when you would go down to the hotel bar, you would talk to the bartender, and you would talk to the person or your left or right. And now when you go to hotel bars, everyone's on their phones. No one is talking to each other anymore. And that's when social media is at its worst.
So how can we get beyond the screen?
Well, my message to people is to put down your technology and pick up a friend. So I've got a number of habits that I'm doing now every day to make sure that I'm getting my good social dosage. I think that, there are extroverts. Extroverts get recharged by being around people. There are introverts that get recharged by being alone, and I'm somewhere in the middle. I really like social relationships, but I do much better in small groups, 1 to 4 people. More than 4 people, my brain just cannot actually jump into conversations. I get overwhelmed. So I do really well with good, solid connections. That's what works best for me. And so I'm making sure that I have a daily connection like this at least once a day.
So along those lines, what are your daily disciplines for having that human connection?
Actually, it's not just human connection. It's my daily disciplines right now for being under quarantine. These are the things that I'm doing to keep myself both physically and emotionally healthy.
Fair enough.
All right. Number 1 is I say or I write down 5 things that I'm grateful for. And they sometimes are the repeat of the day before, sometimes they're new things. But the act is, yes, in writing or saying it, but more importantly, you really want to embody them. You want to kind of really feel them. You want to make sure this really wash over you. That is one of the most consistent factors with people who exhibit happiness is they are very, very grateful. When I was a young kid, I used to think that you got things first and then you were happy. I always looked for toys and cars and games and then I was happy. And now I know it's the opposite. Gratitude precedes happiness.
Well, and it's impossible for anxiety and depression to grow when they're showered with gratitude. Right? I mean, if the flower bed is full of gratitude, it's very difficult for darkness and depression to grow.
Absolutely. So that's one thing that I'm doing every single day. And usually, we've been saying grace before dinner, and then we oftentimes go around and share a couple things that we're grateful for as one of our practices. Second thing I'm doing is I'm meditating every day for at least 5 minutes and hopefully more like 10 to 15. It's not that I don't ever have enough time, but my mind has a hard time with meditation too. My mind goes all over the place. Have you ever meditated before, Coz?
Daily meditation. I'll tell you, it's been one of my saving graces is mindfulness and self-guided meditation every day.
So for those of you who have not meditated, it is super easy. You can go to YouTube and search for 5 or 10-minute guided or unguided meditation. There are ones that are spiritual. There are ones that are not. There are ones with music and people talking. There's ones that are just silent with a bell at the end. You can find all different sorts of meditations. Just keep searching around until you find the one you like. Second, your mind will wander. So don't, curse yourself and get frustrated when your mind wanders. It's completely normal. Third, the whole idea of meditation is to focus the front of your mind, your frontal lobe, on something really simple so the rest of your mind can relax. So the whole idea when you're a kid and your mom told you to count sheep as a way of falling asleep, it's the same idea. I recommend just focusing on your breath. There's no wrong way to meditate. It's called meditative practice for a reason. There's no perfect way of doing it. Next is exercise, and I was a CrossFitter, so I was doing high intensity workouts.
Oh, geez, I don't think I like you anymore. A CrossFitter.
I know,
I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy.
we are members of a cult. There's no question about it. I'm not defending it at all. I'm just saying that I really enjoy it, and it's been pretty good for me, except for my shoulder over here. But now, without going to it, we don't get CrossFit right now. I exercise by walking or doing my Peloton. So even on my quote unquote rest days, I'm not doing high intensity workouts anymore. You can just do a walk for 30 minutes. So exercise every single day, no matter what.
And does the Peloton give you that social interaction as well? Because you can participate in live classes with others, can't you?
Yeah, you can't see somebody and you see other people's statistics. I would put that probably more in the symbolic substitute category than real good human interaction. Yeah.
They're really not there, huh?
Well, they're not really. I mean, it's kind of like you're competing with an avatar more than anything else. You do see an instructor, which is nice, and the instructors really are charismatic and great people. That helps.
Yeah, we're living in a world of avatars, that's for sure.
Number 4 is to read for at least 30 minutes a day. So most of us know how good reading is, but most of us are failing to do it. And as you're kind of getting back in the habit of reading and it's hard for you, most of us have at least at some point in our life been in the habit of reading where you can read a couple hours a day and it's effortless and you have the screen of the mind. So you're like watching a movie while you're reading a book. And if you ever get out of that habit, sometimes it's hard to get back into it. Just start with 30 minutes a day. You can read anything you want. So I'm making my kids read. I don't care what they read as long as they enjoy it. And eventually you'll start graduating to more complicated materials, but read for at least 30 minutes a day.
You know what? That one is so huge, and we have gotten away from reading in this country. And we think reading Facebook is reading. No, we need to truly get into that theater of the mind. And reading is to the mind as exercise is to the body. So if we're going to exercise our bodies, like you talked about, we got to exercise our mind and not just have chewing gum for the ears.
Yeah. I mean, the benefits of reading are multiple. You are calmer. You get better vocabulary. You're better articulating your thoughts. You have more empathy because you start learning about other people's experiences and can project yourself into their mind. And maybe most importantly, you learn other predictive models. So, our brains are a pattern recognition machine. And so what we basically do is we recognize patterns as a way of avoiding trouble, avoiding pain, and hopefully moving toward pleasure. But a lot of us actually have built models in our minds, these predictive models that are actually incorrect. And we're repeating those models over and over again. Those models are causing us pain, and we don't know how to shift them. And so reading is one of the easiest ways to get coaching for yourself, because oftentimes when you're talking with a human being and they're noticing your blind spots or noticing where you're wrong, we get defensive. It's really hard to get defensive when you're reading. It's unusual, it's possible, just not highly probable. So reading is an incredibly powerful technique for actually growing yourself.
Amen. You can tell a lot about a leader by the size of his library.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It's a big deal. You'll rarely find leaders who are not also readers. Almost always they are.
Yeah, which came first, right? Chicken or the egg? Books or
Right.
leadership?
Right.
I can't tear those two apart.
Number 5 is do a daily video chat for at least 30 minutes a day. It can be more than one person or just one person, but we have lots of free technology to go do video chats. You've got Facebook, you got Google Hangouts, you got Skype, you got Apple FaceTime. So you got lots of ways, no excuses for not doing a video face chat. When we actually look at somebody, neurologists thinks there are these things called mirror neurons in our minds that actually get activated. It's one of the things when we're looking at somebody else's face and we're actually picking up on their emotions, it releases oxytocin into our system, dopamine. It makes us feel better. So it's highly recommend you actually look at somebody when doing your video chats.
Very good.
And number 6 is get at least 3 hugs a day. Another fantastic way to relax yourself, reduce your levels of cortisol, increase oxytocin, and it can be same person 3 times a day, but just get really 3 good hugs in every single day. Of those, which one are you not doing, Coz, that you think you should?
You know what? I can honestly say now I've done other than I don't have my 3 hugs yet. I only have 2 of my 3. So I've done all those already today. So
That's excellent.
Done my gratitude journal. I've meditated, took the dog for a walk, spent some extra time out there doing a little jogging through the park to get a little vitamin D in the sunlight. I've read for more than 30 minutes already today. And here we are doing a video chat. And I think we're at like 28 minutes. So we're almost there with 30 minutes. So I've almost been able to check that one off. Tell me a little bit more about this online community you have and what you've learned over the years of having a sense of community, because I think many of our communities have been lost. So let's talk about, yes, we talked about one-on-one communication, but how do we develop more of a sense of community?
That's a great question. So I'm on my second marriage, and I absolutely love my wife. And maybe we've been together now 10 years. And maybe 2 years into it, I met her parents, and her parents had a group of friends who they've been friends with for 35 years. The same group of 15 couples, they've been friends for 35 years and had gone through all of the major benchmarks in life, having kids, careers, losing jobs, raising kids, kids leaving the house, kids coming back home, grandkids. They went through all this stuff together. And I was like, I don't have that. I'm nowhere close to having that. And I realized was really lacking in my life and was probably contributing to my lack of well-being. I didn't feel wholehearted, as it were, because I really didn't have a community. So I wanted to create a community for myself. I looked at a lot of the communities that were out there, and I found many of them either divisive or cultish or off-putting or tribalistic. They weren't quite working for me. So I created a real-world community and a life school called Thrive Union, and you can go to thriveunion.org. And it's nothing more than a community of people unified by the idea that they want to have close, connected relationships, and they want to live a better life, and they also want to give back to other people. So we had regular real world meetings every single Sunday, and we did picnics and parties and game nights and stuff like that. And now we've moved a lot of those meetings online.
So what have you learned by doing these meetings online? If somebody else is out there saying, geez, how do I get more connected to a community? What tips or tricks do you have of developing an online community?
That's a great point. So, the format is the medium of using Zoom calls is unique to being in person. So, when you do an in-person meeting, all that time when you're kind of coming in from the parking lot and you catch someone's eye and you start talking to them and you're walking to your seat, you're having those conversations, all of that is lost. And believe it or not, that pre-time is really important for building relationships. It helps kind of warm us up, lower our anxiety, and make us feel well. So we use Zoom just like you're using it here today. And Zoom has a feature called breakout rooms. And so as people come in, we actually put them into these little breakout rooms with 3 other people. So rather than talking to a quote unquote room of 40 people online, now they're talking with 3 people so they can actually dissect it and actually have one-to-one conversations with 2 or 3 other people. We actually put questions up on the screen so that as they enter, they can go right into connection and conversation time. Then during the course of the meeting, we actually deliver less content. So our real person meetings have more content we deliver. And when we're doing these online meetings, we're sending them more to those breakout rooms more often so they can share and connect. We try to overemphasize the personal connection because it's lacking on the way in the room and out of the room as it would be in a real world meeting.
And what benefits have you seen from your online community? What kinds of experiences have people shared with you?
I cannot tell you the number of people who have come up to me and said, Peter, I was suicidal and now I'm not, or I was on antidepressants and now I'm not anymore. It was a regular, almost one a week, someone would come up to me and tell me that. It was kind of funny. People go to any one meeting and they go, oh, that meeting was okay, no big deal. But the cumulative effect of going to 6 to 8 meetings a month made a mountain of difference in their overall state of well-being and their happiness.
Well, let's talk about mental health for a second, because I think mental health and being mentally healthy and having those positive relationships are I mean, you can't separate those, correct?
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
isn't that one of the key ingredients to mental health is healthy, positive relationships?
It is. It's probably the most important one.
So when you and I were talking earlier this week, you talked about, well, you just have to get out. So give a little more advice there for somebody who is anxious, depressed, alone.
Yeah.
What would you say to them?
So first of all, the loneliness begets more loneliness. So first of all, you don't have to be living alone without a relationship to be lonely. You can be lonely in a marriage. You can be lonely in an office. You could be lonely in a crowded sports at the complex. So loneliness is not relative to who's around. It's more relative to your level of connectedness to them. And when you're experiencing loneliness, that is a pain, just like being hot or hungry or hurting in some way. It's a pain that has got to be addressed. And what's funny is once people, let's say funny, not haha funny, but funny odd, is the more lonely we are, the more our anxiety is, and the less likely we are to go out and be with other people. We start getting kind of paranoid and distrusting of other people. And so, yes, to some degree, you just got to force yourself to start getting out and being with other people. It could be a daily walk with other groups. It could be through meetup groups. It could be meeting friends for coffee and things like that. And you just kind of got to start pushing yourself to do it despite the discomfort.
I've got to think that loneliness is a greater pandemic than whatever else we might be facing.
Yes. So what I was talking about,
and just as unhealthy, right? I mean, we're going to share all kinds of numbers as we go through this whole pandemic situations of those inflicted, those that were tested and found positive, those who died from it. But I'm going to say, and I know you've got a specific term for this, but I would say those ancillary lives that are affected from the pandemic are going to be greater than the pandemic fatalities.
It certainly could be. That's a possibility.
And what did you call that? You had a term for that. I think when we were talking before, you talked about peripheral.
Could be. I
don't remember. Sure. I thought you had a word for it. Anyway.
So what I have been saying is loneliness is the new cancer. And the reason I say that is about 2 or 3 years ago, they printed a new report that basically demonstrated that loneliness was actually worse to your health than smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
Wow.
So yes, the diseases and the deaths of despair, they call them diseases of despair.
That's what you called it, the diseases of despair.
Disease of despair, which include anxiety, depression, addiction, both alcohol, drugs, gambling, violence, and ideation are all on the rise right now. So all of those things start with disconnection.
In what other ways can we make sure we're connected? Because it also means being proactive and overcoming that loneliness that you feel, and maybe being an answer to somebody else's prayers too. You've got to be willing to reach out, kind of welfare checks on your family and friends, and be the one who's proactive to sometimes create that connection or community. Don't wait for people to call you.
Absolutely right. So the first thing is you got to make it a priority. I mean, more or less, I was a hard-charging business person for the better part of 30 years. I worked from 40 to 70 hours a week, and my relational health or my emotional health was always on the back burner. And it wasn't until I kind of woke up and I was really kind of lonely and depressed and disconnected, and I couldn't figure out what it was until I understood how important relationships were. So now I try to, pre-pandemic, spending at least 4 or 5 hours a week actually going out and having drinks, coffee, lunch with friends for no other purpose than just to be with them. Before, when I was building my business, every single meeting had another purpose. How can this relationship be networking or help me drive business? And now I go out and just be with people. That has got to be one of your highest priorities now for your own health.
But I think you just made a distinction by the way you said that. You were doing as a business person with an objective, but there you said, I was just being. Mm-hmm. There's a whole big difference between doing and being. So being present in those relationships is huge.
It is. It's a big deal. I'm going to give you a new concept here, and the concept is your moral compass. So most people have never thought about their moral compass before, but once we decide what is the criteria of our moral compass, it changes all the decisions that we make. So let me give you some examples of a moral compass. So first of all, morality is what's right or wrong. And as soon as I say those words, people kind of go, oh God, don't talk about morality. It sounds really complex. This is really simple. So people might decide the objective of their moral compass is personal enrichment. They basically go, if something makes me money, it is good. If someone doesn't make me money, it is bad. And those are frequently people who are complaining about taxes, and all taxes are bad. And if it makes me money, it is good. And usually their moral compass is only around personal enrichment. I'm not making a judgment about that, but that's basically what how their moral compass is registered. Some other people basically set their moral compass on personal aggrandizement. So basically, if something makes me look good or makes me feel good, then it is good, it's moral. And if it makes me look bad, then it's bad. That's kind of a personal aggrandizement. I would say that most Americans, by default, are somewhere in the area of personal enrichment, more or less. If it makes them money, gives them a bigger house, bigger car, that helps them get more things, then it's good. If it takes those things away, it's bad. Now, where I have set my moral compass is on human well-being. So if something makes my life and makes the people's around me life better, if it enriches them in some way, it is moral. And if it takes away from that, it is immoral. And as soon as you start realizing that maximizing human well-being is the ultimate goal, that makes all the decisions you're making on a day-to-day basis completely different. As a business owner, I was, always looking at people like objects on a chessboard, moving them around to help me further my career. And now I don't. Another mistake of good leaders is good leaders start and end with people, and they see people as contributors, conscious contributors, as human beings with something unique to give to the organization, rather than being role players. So that's a really important distinction to make in your mind of what you think the objective is of your moral compass.
Peter, I am so glad that I actually saw that post this week where you said, for my emotional, personal well-being, let's connect. It has been an absolute pleasure connecting today.
I enjoyed talking with you too, Coz. I'm so glad you did.
And how do our viewers and listeners get a hold of you and learn more about Peter Montoya?
I wrote a book on personal branding called The Brand Called You. So my website address is super easy. It's petermontoya.com. Just petermontoya.com. I'm a leadership strategist, speaker, and author. I do keynote trainings and also keynote speeches for different organizations across the country.
Peter, thank you for your time.
Thanks, guys.
Hey, don't miss any of my videos or live events. Hit that subscribe button now. Also, remember to like and share this video so we can help others. Don't forget to leave your comments below. Onward and upward, my friends.